The challenge before us, from our perspective, is the reality of globalization. The role that this great city plays in the global economy is increasingly important in the wake of neoliberal globalization, where the shift in production to countries scattered all over the world demands centralized command posts to coordinate the process of production. New York City is a key city where financial services, corporate law firms, media, and other high-level services are centralized to help coordinate the global economy. There is an increasing demand for professionals who will work in these professional sectors. And there is also an increasing demand for low-wage service workers who will support this workforce. New York needs taxi drivers. New York needs restaurant workers, security guards, doormen, dry cleaners, delivery workers, and New York needs domestic workers. Nannies, housekeepers, elder caregivers who do the work in the home that makes it possible for the professional sectors to go to work. New York, in fact, survives and thrives off the labor of workers in unregulated sectors. If you go to Penn Station or Grand Central on Monday morning around 8:30 a.m., you'll see lots of people in suits getting off the trains to go to work. Well, at least 3 hours before that, an enormous workforce of women of color from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, over 200,000 workers, in fact, got on the trains to go to work so that the people in suits could leave their homes. They're here in New York because neoliberal policies of so-called free trade and structural adjustment have made it impossible for them to live and support their families where they are from. Domestic workers care for the most important elements of their employers' lives, their families, their homes, their children, often at the expense of time with their own families. And yet, in the isolation of their employers' homes, they're completely vulnerable and suffer some of the most terrible abuses imaginable. In the past month alone, we received three new cases involving domestic workers who were faced with various violations and abuses. One involved a nanny in Tribeca who was physically assaulted and thrown out of the house, along with all of her belongings, into the street and threatened with immigration deportation. She's owed a month's wages and tens of thousands in overtime pay. The second involves two women who worked as nannies for an employer who worked at home and would strip naked and walk around the house without clothes the entire day while his wife was at work. They've told us that they heard from other women who worked with him before who were actually physically assaulted that they decided to leave before it escalated. The third case involves a woman who was fired with no notice or severance pay for telling her employer that she needed to undergo surgery after many years on the job. While each situation is different, what is clear is that the reality is anything goes in this industry despite the existence of laws. This work, which has traditionally been seen as women's work, has been devalued by society. As a form of wage labor, it has been seen as Black women's work or immigrant women's work, and has been repeatedly discriminated against and excluded from key labor protections. Some of the hard-won monumental victories of the labor movement, such as the National Labor Relations Act or the Fair Labor Standards Act, exclude domestic workers by name. The Fair Labor Standards Act included domestic workers in 1974 as a result of organizing on the part of African American workers in the South. But with one worker per workplace trying to negotiate with employers in their homes on their terms, workers have no hope of negotiating good conditions and end up completely vulnerable. And not only is it not protected for domestic workers to collectively bargain because of NLRA exclusions, the reality is that it's an impossibility. There are 200,000 households, 200,000 sets of employers, and there's no way of knowing who they all are or where they are. And this is why many have said that this workforce is unorganizable. We at DWU have not let that stop us. We are organizing, we're building the power of workers, and we're uniting with other organizations that represent domestic workers, such as Gonzalo's group, And together we have developed a solution. We are fighting for a domestic workers' Bill of Rights in New York to establish labor standards for the first time in this country for this really critical and highly vulnerable workforce, including a living wage, health care, and basic benefits. Ultimately, the Bill of Rights is justice for generations of exclusion and discrimination, establishing standards that otherwise will never be negotiated, and recognizing the workforce as a real workforce once and for all. In terms of the direction of this workforce in the future, as globalization charges ahead, more and more women will come to New York in search of work. And as wealth inequality continues to grow in this city, this workforce will continue to grow. Research has shown that the growth of this workforce directly reflects the growth in wealth inequality. So as we understand the depth and scope of inequality that exists in this city through the lens of unregulated work, we also see opportunities to build solidarity across workforces, particularly among unregulated sectors, to build a workers' movement that reflects a vision for a more humane future for all New York workers. We've already seen the potential power that unregulated workforces hold when organized, particularly through the recent successful taxi strikes. We have an opportunity here to develop a stronger strategy to build a workers' movement that brings together the power of these workforces along with unionized workers toward changing the future of the city. And we hope that this conversation moves us in that direction. Indeed, workers are facing the reality of deregulation around the world. It's not just in New York, as was mentioned earlier, and is also a moment for us to reach out and seize opportunities for solidarity internationally that neoliberal globalization has put before us. Finally, just to close, New York domestic workers will need each and every one of your support in the campaign to win the passage of the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. Please ask your union or organization to send a letter of support and get involved as best you can. It will take all of us to win, and I have more information with me. Thank you very much.